First of all, you got to be in it for the long haul. There's way too many success stories, people talking about, listen, you give it a good couple years, you'll build a good business, and then you're on the beach. No, that doesn't happen.
Hey guys, Damien Stevens, host of MSP Mindset, founder and CEO of Serosity. Today, I continue my mission to interview 100 of the fastest growing and most interesting MSPs on the planet and write the book on it. Today, I am blessed to be joined by Jeff Borrello, and he's been an MSP for 30 years and been blessed to grow to $9 million in revenue. But he realized that's not the path forward. 18 months ago, he began his journey to niche and define his niche. And while he hasn't got it all figured out yet, he opens up and goes step by step of what it took and the results so far. So if niche is something that you're considering or a little too scared to consider, don't miss out on my conversation with Jeff today. So Jeff, thank you for joining me today. I wanted to kind of get us started with why the heck did you start your MSP? And were the founders there originally or not?
Yeah. So, we started it so long ago, MSP wasn't a thing yet. Because we were just like IT guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we really got started. So the three myself and my two other co-founders worked right down the street from where we are now at a place that was a high-tech company. They did high-speed data acquisition. And we worked hard there. We'd work 60, 70, 80-hour weeks sometimes. And it was fun. It was a good group of people. But it was always a little bit of a struggle. Sometimes they'd be on cutbacks, or they'd be, you'd be working 5 days and getting paid for 4. And they just always struggled. So at one point, one of us said, hey, if we're going to work this hard, we should do something for ourselves.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what do we? Well, we kind of maintain the network here, and we know computers. So yeah, let's go start a computer business. Was really where it started, right?
What year was this?
Right? This was old fashioned, right? So we didn't quit. We didn't take money. We just did it on the side, weekends, long lunches, and slowly over time, built it up into a real place.
What year was that you started off?
1994.
94. It seems like a good year to start. Start what was not an MSP, right? When did you guys make a decision to move towards managed services?
Oh boy, that's a good question. It was early on, we somewhere, and I don't even, it's so long ago, I don't remember. I remember the office we were in. We're in about our third office, probably. Well, technically our second, if you don't count the homes. And somebody from what was then the original Enable got a hold of us on a cold call or something, started talking to us about this, this managed service and proactive, and we got into it from that. And that was back when nobody knew what it was. So Enable spent a lot of time. They had a lot of education courses built, and they spent a lot of time with us, like teaching people how to do this. So we were pretty early on, and for probably the first 3 or 4 years, it was pretty sporadic, right? I mean, you'd get some monitoring set up and it didn't work. And, over the years we went through, who knows how many RMMs trying to find the right one. And, that was a really big struggle, and still is to some extent, right? But yeah, that was probably 6 years in, maybe 7. Maybe like 2001, somewhere in there. It gets really, this is one of the things I always wished I had kept better notes along the way on different things. We have like really big milestones. You have something noted, but some of those little things that happen along the way, it's like, you just don't know. It's really hard to go back and figure it out.
I had somebody the other day saying they were early to manage services in 2008. So, even if you're off by a year or two, that was certainly early. Hey guys, Damien here. As I continue to interview the top MSPs in the world, one thing has become incredibly clear. It's time that we let go. Even more than that, every time I focus on my zone of genius and get out of the way and do the very few things I'm good at and delegate to others, I'm ready for that next level of growth. So if you're ready for that next level of growth, one way that I could help you is with Serosity. We co-manage your backups and disaster recovery so you can focus on what you do best, let us do the rest, and then what we do is we test the backups every single day so you never have to worry. If you'd like to learn more, click the link below. So help everybody understand where you are now in terms of maybe revenue and headcount.
Yeah. So this year, we'll do about 9 million in revenue. Probably there's about 36 of us.
Okay.
We've gone over, and we'll probably get into this at some point, but over the years we added in some other product lines. So we were a telephone system provider for a while, like real telephone systems, on-prem kind of stuff. We had a security division doing physical security. So we got pretty wide over the years with a lot of different things. We've since now trimmed that all back, sold pieces off, and we're back to just being an IT provider. An MSP, and we'll actually have it this year. Will be a little bit of a down revenue probably because we shut off about $1 million worth of that business.
Sure. Okay. So why sell it off? Why focus?
Great question. So all the businesses that we added, and there was some synergy, but it was all about synergy. Well, and we got into telephone systems because customers were asking us, "Hey, we got this telephone system here. Can you help us with it?" And when we were small, the three of us would look around and say, "I don't have time for that."
Yeah.
We knew how to do it. But then one of my partner's brother-in-laws was coming out of the phone system business, and he wanted to get back into phone systems. He said, "Hey, what do you guys think?" And so we brought him on. And then he was doing phone systems, and we brought a few more people on, and suddenly we're in the phone system business. And then, 5 years in, we buy a company that just did phone systems, right? For 30 years they were doing it, and the owners were retiring. So we always thought there'd be some synergy and some crossover, and there was to some extent. And then same thing, we bought a web development company, we bought a physical security company, and we did all these things. And there was some synergy, but what we found was we were really struggling to bring it all together from a marketing standpoint and from a strategy standpoint. So every quarter, our leadership team would go off and we'd talk about planning for the next quarter or the next year. And we'd talk about the IT business, and then we'd say, okay, well, now what about the physical security business? And they're very different businesses, right? One's heavy recurring revenue. The other one's very big projects. And what we eventually decided over a few years was like, we just didn't have the bandwidth to try to figure out how to maintain these essentially very different businesses. So we slowly started peeling that back and said, let's get back to what we know, what we started with, and really kind of hone that in and get our focus down. It was really about focus is really what it came down to.
Gotcha.
They were good businesses. We enjoyed them. But it was just too much for the size of the team we had.
I see. So it was too much for the size of team you had. How did you do that? Like, you decided that's one thing that's already ahead of a lot of folks, but like, you have customers, so they're expecting you to fix their phone system. You don't want to have a negative impact, especially when they're a great managed services client and that business is transitioned off. So I'm curious, like, how did you go about that?
Yeah, that was the biggest challenge, was the customers where they were in multiple of our business units, right? Was trying to break that without breaking the relationship or without making somebody ticked off, right? Just a lot of communication, right? Explaining to them the why, making sure we had somewhere good to hand the business. So the last one we did was our physical security business, and we sold that to one of our technicians, right? So they already knew him. He already knew the business. He's still renting space from us, so he didn't go far. But I think it's all about just making sure the handoff is clean and making sure they understand the why, and we're not going anywhere, and we're really doing this so you get better service on both sides. But some people didn't like it, and there were customers over the years that they did all of that with us. We did their phone system. We did their website. We did their physical security. So, every couple of years they kind of get this next ping that something's getting peeled off. And it was definitely a lot of conversations to be had about that internally. Like, okay, what are we going to do and how are we going to do this? But for the most part, it was pretty smooth. All the customers understood. And it made it a smooth transition.
Do you think it made it harder or easier that some of it was that you actually paid for those businesses? Like, you actually paid to get into the phone business more deeply?
Yeah, that probably really didn't come into play a lot. I'm sure we talked about it, but for the most part, we probably did a pretty good return on our investment on most of it. Some of it maybe not as much, but part of that is it's for us, we don't spend a lot of time looking backwards. So it's like, hey, we did that, we did our thing. Now it's time for a new direction, and we're going to make the right decision based off that. And for the most part, it was, looking forward versus looking back. And that investment was that investment. We did what we could with it, and it was time to do the next thing.
Mm. So now that you've bought and sold, I don't know how easy this is to answer, but how much of if you're at, let's say, 9 million, how much of that did you buy, or how much of that's organic? Even rough idea. I'm just curious
this
if you
point,
bought
really,
mostly,
it
or.
probably is. It's probably our organic at this point. I mean, we probably have a few customers that were the synergies that came over from the other ones, but most of those pretty much stayed standalone. The latest acquisition we did was we really brought over. They called themselves an MSP, but what they really were was it was a whole bunch of Microsoft 365 accounts. That's probably shy of $1 million a year of just Office 365 revenue. So it's not high margin revenue at all, but it's revenue. That is really that came straight from the buy. And some of those customers we've grown into some other things, but pretty much, call that 800,000-900,000 that was strictly from the purchase.
Okay. And so 9 million, 36 employees, however you want to frame it, that's further than most MSPs get. What do you attribute to the growth and just continuing to be able to getting there at all and then continuing to grow?
Yeah, well, 30 years helps.
That's true, but I've talked to 30-year-old MSPs that are half or a fourth the size.
Yeah, that's true. Consistency, right? It's you don't give up. I mean, that's one of our core values is grit, right? You have to have grit in this business, but you just have to keep trying and doing. And this didn't work, and the consistency, right? I mean, we've never tried to just grow. I mean, other than when we did a purchase, but like we don't want to grow 30% in a year because it just breaks so much stuff. So it's been consistent. The turtle wins the race kind of thing, I guess. Just slow organic growth. We don't do anything crazy. And then delivering consistent, good service to the clients, right? So that most of the clients are sticking around. I mean, we have our very first client, our very first corporate client that we signed. They're still here. They came back. So they got purchased and they left and then they came back, right? You'll see that. So several of our customers have been here for almost our whole entire lifetime. So I think it's that delivering consistent service. And then but people are going to leave, right? Companies get purchased, they go out of business, all kinds of things happen. So you have to be constantly refreshing that pipeline to bring in new customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So consistency of service, but you also mentioned kind of refreshing the pipeline. So how does that mean that you've figured out anything about sales and marketing, which seems to be the bane of most businesses, let alone MSPs?
Yeah. No, every time you think you have it figured out, something changes and then all of a sudden you don't have it figured out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, back in the day, we were the king of, so we're in, Lockport, Illinois, which is right next to Joliet. And we were the kings of Joliet, Illinois and the Yellow Pages, right? I mean, when we started, that was the entire marketing you did. You put a thing in the Yellow Pages, you joined the local chamber, and you got all the business you could possibly need. Mm-hmm. And slowly you do more phone books, right? And until that didn't work. Mm-hmm. So then it was, okay, now you get your online presence. So I think it's just constantly innovating on the marketing side, and nothing works forever, right? And if you find something that works, well, you better double down on it while it does. Mm-hmm. So I think that's that again, it goes back to not giving up, right? Is you have to keep wanting to try something new and know that not everything's going to work. And there's a new tool you need and you have to learn the new tool. So it's not exactly a slog, but you better be in for the long haul and be ready to do it. It's a lifetime of learning and a lifetime of doing, and you got to be ready to do that. And we've been able to do that, right? And the consistency that my two co-founders are still here day to day, right? Mm-hmm. I do not envy MSPs where it's a single owner and they're trying to do everything in the beginning. They can't take a vacation, right? Yeah. That's tough. Yeah. So we were lucky enough that we picked three guys who get along. We all know our roles. And we've had some blow ups here and there, right? Sure. But we're still here. And again, it's that consistency that we know we can count on each other. And if we wanted to, get into the telephone system business, we could hand that to one of us and they went and did it, right? So that helps spread out the pain a lot, I think. Okay.
That makes a lot of sense. It's so hard to be a solo founder. I know that, and then I've done it again. So not always the fastest learner. Um, Speaking of continuing to learn and innovate, so is it 30 years you've been in business?
Yeah, 30 plus. It was 30 in October.
Okay. And so, but tell me about this new thing that you've been working on around. I say new. I think it's relatively new. You now are focused. I've been on your website. Take a look on a niche. How new is that to you?
So about 18 months ago, probably we started talking about it and heading down that path. And for prior to that, we kind of fell into a niche. So we had a lot of business in medical. We happen to have a phenomenal. Well, he was a sales guy. Now he's our VP of sales, who got some really strong partnerships with some EMR vendors, and we were able to just get a lot of medical clients over a 5 or 6 year period. So we had a pretty strong presence in medical. But then that industry has just gone through a lot of changes where there's roll-ups, the hospitals are buying doctors, there's giant medical units buying all these little individual providers. And it was getting to be where, every month somebody was showing up with another buyout. And in one case, we had about 5 or 6 or 7 clients all get bought by the same place. So we said, okay, we got to get out of this. We got to get out of the medical space as a marketing pursuit. And I always have wanted, you read books. I spend a lot of time reading, right? And the riches are in the niches. You hear it and people that have done it, right? There's other MSPs that get very specific and they've been very successful. So it's one of those things I've always kind of wanted to do. And then I happened to be at a conference where I got seated next to a manufacturing guru who was just talking about all this investment that's going to come back into the United States and how manufacturing is going to get a boom going. And it just, timing was great and I said, you know what, let's give this a try. So we've spent the last 18 months really trying to look at, what it takes to learn that industry, get all our marketing targeted that way and really get ourselves honed in. And it's a scary journey. Probably, about every other month we go, I don't know. Somebody says, we're not getting enough traction here. This isn't going to work. We should go and go back. But again, it goes back to that. You got to stay the course. It's not a sprint. It's a journey to get there. And we're starting to see more traction. We're starting to see the manufacturers really understand that, here's someone that knows our industry and it's going to be a fun ride for sure.
So I have so many questions around this. One, why now? 30 years in, right? Why after 30 years do you need to niche when you had never niched before? And I'm asking you, and I'm also depending, I don't know what you'll say, but like most, I think MSPs are sitting in the same spot going, what do I do? It's scary. So I'm kind of curious why.
Yeah, I'm not one for the status quo generally. Now I'm also it's not broke, don't fix it. And again, I think a lot of things happen because of timing, right? We knew this medical roll-up stuff was going on. We were definitely struggling in marketing, right? And it almost goes back to the same reason we spun off that last physical security company. Again, it was $1 million of revenue, right? It was a decent sized part of our business, but it was making marketing so hard. Are we marketing an IT company? Are we marketing a physical security company? So I think it was all around this whole concept of focus. And we, over the years, have been a very somewhat unfocused company other than deliver good service, and figure it out as you go. So I think for me, again, I spend a lot of time reading and learning and just can constantly hear and focus. And just all these pieces came into play at once and said, all right, let's do this. And it really, because I'm the guy that's leading up the marketing effort, it was pretty easy for me to say, and then we talked to some of our marketing partners and they were like, oh, this is a great idea. And then you start seeing the website change with just this single industry there and everything just gets a lot easier while being a little bit scarier and maybe just a little bit of a different business from certain aspects.
So part of it is you're just not the guy that stays in the same lane forever. But I want to understand the story. You're sitting next to a manufacturer and they were saying there's a lot of opportunity and we need more people that understand the space. Or what was it? Or did they say, hey, I can give you tons of business if you can move into this area?
Yeah, no, it was nothing that specific. It was really because I don't even know. I don't even know that he knew I was in IT, although I'm sure I mentioned it at some point. But we
Mm.
were just really having this conversation about manufacturing. So this is Jack Stack. He is from the Great Game of Business. Everybody usually knows him from that. And I think he still runs the Springfield Remanufacturing Corporation. So he's a legend, right? So the fact that I got seated next to him was just somebody said, "Hey, do you want to sit next to Jack for lunch?" Heck yeah, right? And not with any, big plan in mind. But then we were just talking, and he just started talking about, oh yeah, you're going to see manufacturing coming back to the States, and getting this resurgence, and just in the government's going to get start putting some money behind it, and it was just this concept of like, and I'm a big USA guy, right? I think this is the greatest country there is,
Mm. I
and I
agree.
love the fact made in the USA. That gets me excited. I like that, back the way things were way back in the day when things were made here and people did things with their hands, and kids went to trade schools and all that kind of stuff. That just, it was like, wow, this is really going to be an amazing Renaissance time. I thought, wow, when we could actually play a part in it. So yeah, I came back to my leadership team pretty excited about it. And I'm sure they were not too excited about my thoughts. But again, it goes back to, I think part of the reason we've been successful and grown and still here 30 years later is because we don't just rest on our laurels. We don't just say, well, this is good enough. Let's ride it all the way into the sunset until you find out that it's not working anymore. Right.
Sure.
So I'm going to try some new things, see what works, try some more new things. And this just sounded like an exciting opportunity. And it gave us a chance to get back to kind of what we had fallen into accidentally in the medical field.
Mm. So I'm curious, you come back to your leadership team and you say, I had lunch with Jack Stack and he thinks manufacturing's going to experience a resurgence. Now we're going to niche. I mean, like, I'm curious, like, I think, I know I'm often guilty of something that sounds about like that.
Yeah.
There's probably more detail, but I'm curious, how bought in were they? How skeptical initially were they to this big change?
I'm sure it was not just one meeting, and it probably was stretched over months. Sometimes you got to bring the idea up, let it simmer a little bit, take some pushback, come back. My guess would be probably one member of my leadership team was probably like, "Hell yeah, let's go!" Right? Because again, he's a learner, he's a reader, he knows the niche story. Probably pretty skeptical from the rest of the group. So it was a slow, and then I probably went off. I did some research a little bit on the market size and, in Illinois where we're at, and plus the Midwest where we were looking to grow, and really just then continuing to kind of expand the plan a little bit. Like, okay, here's what this could look like. I talked to our marketing partners. They're all on board. So it was just kind of a slow conversation and let everybody warm up a little bit and then talk about, okay, what's this really look like? And then eventually, you wear them down and they give up fighting me and we do our thing and then you go from there. And again, I think part of it is I said, listen, if it doesn't work, this is not a one-way door that we can't come back through. We can always revisit it.
Yeah. So I think a lot of the topics or some of the discussion is like, how do I pick my niche? And sometimes I call it an accidental niche where you look and you just have some of your best clients in a particular niche. It sounds like it was different here. Tell me how you picked this, why you picked manufacturing.
Yeah. And I think part of it is, the thing I've been saying is I don't think it matters what niche, right? You got to find a niche that it can't be obviously so tiny that it's not going to work.
Right.
We did not have a lot of customers in the manufacturing space when we did this, which was one of the concerns. Like, okay, this is kind of uncharted territory for us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was really the conversation. Had I had a conversation with Jack, we may have ended up somewhere else. But I think the other piece of it is it's an exciting industry, right? I mentioned the three co-founders. We came out of this environment where it was a data acquisition company. So we made hardware and software. It was a hardware and software company, but our customers were manufacturers, GE aircraft engines, Ford engine test cells. So we very much came out of that manufacturing environment. So it was kind of exciting to get back to that. It's awesome to see the things that get made. I'm on LinkedIn all the time and there's all kinds of manufacturers post these videos up and I'm just blown away by the amount of automation and the amount of things that can be done to produce. I mean, you think about the amount of things that get produced. It's just mind blowing how many things there are and just how they get made. So I think it's an exciting, medical, when we were in medical, it was exciting because you felt like you were helping doctors help people. Right.
Right.
legal, financial, all those places, it's, they're servicing people. But this was something new to get back to watching things made and being part of that process. I think was just kind of going back to our origin roots when we worked at the other company.
Mm. So you clearly have done some work on this. I'm curious for, for myself and just for folks that are listening, like, where did you go to learn more about how do you niche and how do you start and what do you do? And did you come up with all this yourself? Were there resources you found that were really helpful?
Yeah, we did probably mostly ourselves.
Okay.
And again, there's a lot of resources out there, right? Hopefully the ones you're looking at are the right ones. We probably didn't spend as much time figuring out how to niche as much as just working on the niche, right? Figuring out what the marketing collateral needed to need, understanding what the needs of the industry were, what software products they use, where they're at in their IT journey, right, in the life cycle of the industry. So it was probably more about just getting into the nitty gritties of doing it versus how to do it.
So how are you doing that? Because I want to dig into that, because even if you have one or two and you had none, so I love this, you still need to understand them far better than you do, right? All their applications, what they're thinking about. So how did you start going about that?
Yeah. And we did have a couple probably. So we started with them and we understood them pretty well. There were some pretty decent sized manufacturers that we were taking good care of, and they liked us. We liked them. So just talking to them, going to industry events. We joined the local, the TMA, the local association here for technology manufacturers. Joined that. And just having conversations with people, right? I mentioned our VP of sales. He is a phenomenal networker, right? So he makes a couple calls, he meets a couple of people, he meets a couple of other people, he puts some people together, and pretty soon he's got 10 different people he's being able to pick their brain about.
Yeah. So going back to what you were saying, old-fashioned street work, which I love, just doing it, right? Not the other thing I love about that, Jeff, is as a technical person, I tend to overthink things.
Yeah.
And I want to think through this plan and that plan. So I love that you dove right in. You started talking to people that, joined the association, talking to those folks and asking what are they struggling with? What are their issues? Do you have in your mind, like, here's when we'll know if this is working, or here's how long we should give this? Because you said it's a door you could walk back through. I'm curious if you have any mental model of, like, how will we know?
Yeah. So a couple of things we've done is, we follow the metronomic system. A lot of people know EOS or scaling up. This is kind of another business operating system that we kind of follow. So, but as part of that process, we have BHAG defined. It's 5-10 years out that we're talking about. Being the premier manufacturing MSP in the country. Then we have something called the 3HAG, which is a 3-year highly achievable goal. Right. So we have some goals set 3 years out, and then this year we have a goal of how many manufacturers we want to add this year. And so it's just setting up some achievable goals that we think we can meet, that then we at least have some metrics, right? And to some extent, I think we'll know it if it's working.
Yeah.
But that's not really a great way to operate. So it is really, I think, for us beneficial to have some goals that we know we can measure against. Again, it's some months are better than others. And we are definitely specializing and focusing on manufacturing. But if the right client calls up and they're not in manufacturing, we're not at the point where we're turning them away. We hope to get to there someday, right? That is the goal, so that we are really only servicing one vertical industry. But what we're noticing is, like, more and more of the conversations we're having with prospects are manufacturing and a little less of others, right? Mm-hmm. So some of that, you get a little flywheel going, a little momentum going, and suddenly what was, you're talking to manufacturers once a month, now it's twice a month, and pretty soon it's 3 times, and now you're starting to get some referrals, and you're making the right contacts. One of the things I mentioned was, our VP of sales was a good networker, and that's how we ended up with so many medical clients, is now just having him rinse and repeat and do that again in manufacturing, and just, getting the right contacts, learning the right people. So I think, again, it's about setting the goals, but I think there's also something just in my soul. I'll know it. If it's working, I'll know it. And if growth starts to stall, or we could find out, man, manufacturing is just a terrible industry for us. Or, we may have to, it may be that we're getting the clients, but maybe we don't like them, or maybe they don't like us. So I think it's just always keeping once a year evaluating where are we? Is this working? Is it not working? And then being willing to at some point call it and say, you know what, this wasn't a good idea, or it just didn't work, or whatever. So I think you got to have the willingness to look at it and make sure that you don't, stick to your guns just because you thought it was a good idea and maybe it's not.
Mm. So I admire your courage to do it and to talk about it in the midst of it, which is really, really fun, Jeff, and very rare. I'm curious, what are you hoping to get out of niche besides maybe, you just have one association to go to, like besides the sales side, what do you think will come out of this?
I think one of the things that makes being an MSP hard is trying to serve so many different people, so many different environments, and just the more variety there is, the harder it is on the team. So I think the more things you can make the same, whether it's the stack you're supporting, the hardware you're supporting, or the industry or industries that you're supporting, I think it just makes it easier on the team. And while it's not necessary, you can certainly, I always say 80, 90% of it is exactly the same for all the clients, right? No matter what industry they're in. But I think the more you can learn a single thing, whatever it may be, a tool, hardware, industry, I just think it makes everybody's job easier. And I think when people say, what do you do? Well, we're an IT company. Well, no, we're an IT company and we service manufacturers. And I think there's just some level of, it sounds less like you're just, we back in the day when we did phone systems IT, people would say, I don't want the Walmart of IT companies.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I think a little bit you feel like you're just this, it's a little bit of a circus. So I think the more you can narrow things down and get some nice, bumper set up where we know we get to stay in our lane, I just think it makes it easier, and I think it makes it more fun at some point. Even when you think about one of the things we're doing now, we're rolling out kind of a new packaged product and we're trying to come up with a name for it. And if you could name it around a manufacturing type of name, that's much easier than just some general, right? So I think it's more fun being a not a generalist in some extent.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Constraints give you freedom in a certain way, I suppose.
Yeah. That was a much better way to say that. Thank you.
It's the fun part of getting to listen while you have to come up with the hard answers there. What I've started to refer to niche as single, dual, triple. And so what I mean by that is generally a single one is like we're in manufacturing. Maybe a second layer is that and these applications. A third layer could be that, but we only do it in this way. We deliver it in a co-managed way or in a cloud first way or in this way. And if you're going to be on our platform, you also have to do that. So that's kind of a triple niche. There's a lot of those. So without necessarily you don't have to use my wording, but I'm curious, in your journey, is this manufacturing? Is it manufacturing within a certain subset of manufacturing? And keep in mind, you can use those words, but I won't know which ones that is. And then, is it within a geographic area? I'm just kind of curious if sometimes I realize there's a little more to it.
Yeah.
Just like, for example, I think the worst example is healthcare.
Yeah.
And I mean this in the nicest way, guys, but when you're like, I'm in healthcare, that's like saying I'm in IT, right?
Yeah.
Like it's one of the biggest parts of our economy. So like, okay, so now you're down to a third of the world or what I mean? Like that doesn't really help a whole lot. It's probably better than none, but it's not specific. I know if somebody said I'm an IT guy in healthcare, I wouldn't immediately think, who should I introduce them to?
Right.
But if they say I'm an IT guy who focuses on optometrists in this particular way, I would go, oh, I've got one of those. Maybe you should talk to them. I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on that. Feel free to say that's crazy. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on it?
I certainly don't think it's crazy. I think it's actually, it's just the next level where I don't think we're there yet. I think part of it is learning, for example, chemical manufacturers may have different needs than building material manufacturers. And some of those may not need as much technology, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we look for is a manufacturer that is, they're they're kind of dependent on technology, right? They have an ERP system, right? And believe it or not, some of them don't, right? We just talked to one, somebody from my group talked to somebody this week that they have pencil and paper. They're still doing things with paper. It's like, so, in some regards you say, well, that's a great opportunity, but this is a place that does not invest in technology and it's going to be a long, slow road. So I think some of it is just early in the journey. We don't want to take all comers for sure, but I think you got to take enough to start learning where the right places are that fit for us. Right. So there may be a chemical manufacturer who doesn't have an ERP. They still need IT help. It just may not be us. So certainly our focus initially is on the Midwest, right? We picked 8 states right around Illinois. And that's where we want to focus. Can we do someone that's not in those 8 states? Sure. And we will, right? Because really serving someone in Idaho is no different than serving somebody in Illinois. Other than, again, it goes back to the marketing, right? It's much easier to start marketing in a smaller region. But then when you go to our BHAG is to be the premier IT provider for manufacturers across North America. Right? Mm-hmm. So we do have this growth mindset that goes with that. And I think every quarter as we go down that path, we will learn a little bit more, and we will probably niche it up a little bit more. We will say, listen, because even back when we were, in any industry, we still had a few that we wouldn't touch. We wouldn't do retail. And we learned that the hard way. We wouldn't do restaurants and POS, which we learned the hard way, right? So we had some industries where we knew were bad fit for us. Yeah. And I think we'll discover the same thing with manufacturing. There's so much manufacturing out there, even just in these 8 states, that you can certainly afford to narrow it down to, again, find the ones that fit right and feel right for us.
I love that you have an intuitive feel for that already.
Yeah. And I think, you mentioned it, one of those second layers is, are we looking for someone that needs fully managed or co-managed right now? And right now we're finding a little of both. Mm-hmm. And I think over time, I suspect that will fall one way or the other, right? Because almost every manufacturer we run into has some sort of technology people, but sometimes they write software and they've now, hey, you're the technical guy, go fix this, right? So there's a lot of need out there to help those teams that they just got too much on their plate and they're not able to do it all. So I think again, it's just learning and then looking at the data, right, and analyzing the data and say, okay, where do we fit the best?
So you might be the best one to answer this because you're in the middle of it. So how are you practically doing this discovery? You meet with those people, and then what? Because it seems like understanding their business challenges or their common up, maybe they have a common ERP or something like that could be critical, but I'm just curious, how do you go about that?
It's a combination. We send our salesperson out, right, to really talk about, what's your pains, right? And one of the things we generally do not, we don't want to be the first MSP in the door, preferably. If they've been doing it internally, that transition is sometimes a little rough on their team. Yeah. So we're looking for someone who has an MSP that they're using that they're probably not happy with for whatever reason, right? Or something's going on, or they had an incident or something. So first and foremost, it's understanding, okay, what's going on that's got you looking? What are you not happy with? Oh, you're using a single person and they're retiring, right? We hear that a lot. So that's the first thing, is just seeing, is there enough pain there that you really want to make a switch? One of the things we do is, we try to get them as far along to our common stack as we can, and right, which means sometimes replacing some hardware that they don't want to. So there's some upfront investment that we're going to request/require that they may not want to do. So it's having that conversation up front that, again, we want to make sure we're the right fit for them. If you're not willing to invest the $100,000 it's going to take you to get you where we need you to get to in the next 3 years, we're not the right ones for you. Mm-hmm. So it's again, I mentioned one of our core values. One of our other core values is communication, right? So we're very much upfront with, we don't want to bring somebody on and then give them a bunch of surprises. So we spend a lot of time trying to understand where they are in their journey, how well it matches up with us. And the second thing we do is we will take one of our engineers out and do a little bit more of a deep dive into what they have, what's this going to look like to get them to where they need to go. So it's just a lot of conversation, a lot of understanding, and a lot of just saying, okay, is this the right thing? Now, early on in the journey, we're kind of listen, if it's a manufacturer, we're going to take them on. Sure. Because we don't know the industry quite well enough to be able to understand good, bad from other, and we're going to learn. Yeah.
So that's a little bit, because that's it. I think look, there's people that are further in the journey, and sometimes I think they forgot that there's this customer discovery phase, which is very much feels like walking around in a cave with a flashlight. I feel like, right? You don't have a map. You don't know which way to go. And you gotta ask questions, and you gotta take manufacturers and see what you learn.
Yeah. And that's, in our 30-year history, that's how we've always done it. People say, listen, we're not big into like go do market research and go interview 50 different places. It's like we learn as we do, right? So that's just kind of always been our MO. We're way more get in there and figure it out and learn from it as opposed to try to do all the learning up front. So I think that's good and bad. I think it depends, it's a little bit of a personality thing, and that just happens to be the personality that fits us. And it's pretty well worked, pretty well for the 30 years.
Yeah. Are you finding, is this differentiation starting to resonate at all? Like, obviously the beginning, maybe it didn't, but now maybe your website, maybe tweaks to messaging. I'm just curious, like is it starting to resonate at all or not yet?
I think so. Matter of fact, we had a prospect reach out last week, a couple weeks ago, and my sales guy was like, I don't know, not sure this is the right fit. But then the more we dug, we looked at it and was like, oh, this is actually a manufacturer, right? So I think we're seeing, and I have no doubt, and this comes up in some of our meetings, I have no doubt that there are people that land on our webpage that are not a manufacturer that are looking for an MSP that go elsewhere, because we do look, again, we'll take them, but we do look very specialized. And I think part of it is because we, and I have to remind my team of this a lot, we don't need 100 new customers. We don't want 100 new customers, right? We need one a month or one every other month. And that's a good growth year for us, right?
Yeah.
So part of it is, that's kind of the magic of it, is unless you're in an industry where you need a lot of high volume, that's where the niche can come into play, right? Is because you can be selective and you don't need as much. It sort of plays together nicely, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Going back to your team and, people landing on your website that aren't, right? There's obviously this fear. Clearly, you could, if they reach out to you, you could still do business until you're ready to turn away everything else. But do you expect revenue to be flat or slower? Is there a period where you're like, hey, besides the cost of the website, like part of the investment is we think we'll be a little slower growing because, we're figuring it out. It's going to take some time. And then once we really get our flywheel spinning of, understand them better, or adjust our marketing, and then adjust our messaging, and then adjust our target, and then keep doing that it'll become easier and easier. But do you think it will slow things down in the interim or not?
I think, it's funny that you mentioned, I don't know that we actually had that. That's a pretty obvious realization that I'm not sure we actually had. Other than we said, yeah, we know we're going to chase some people off, right? But I don't think we actually made the whole conversation of, well, yeah, that may actually be a downturn in revenue. Last year, 2024 was just an odd duck year anyway. And not just for us, but for other people, right? Just the election year, and the marketing leads were down and people weren't signing deals. And it was just a very funny year. So
yeah.
Again, timing is everything. We may have had a very lucky timing of all this, that last year was probably going to be a bad year anyway, for certain aspects. And now this year, it really does seem like, now I almost feel a little bit, it's a little premature in the year, but so far this year, it's been good. Probably, 50% of our leads have been coming from the manufacturing space, and we're having good conversations. And it's starting to resonate, and we're starting to get the right partnerships and conversations. So I feel like maybe last year was really the year that was going to be problematic for that. And it was going to be problematic anyway. So I think we kind of got past the worst of it. And I think we're getting to the spot now where now all these pieces are starting to work together, and we're starting to get the traction that we want. So I think that was a very long answer to, I'm hoping not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you that it will or won't, right? I'm just curious what your take on it was. And because I think there is too much fear of, as soon as we pick a niche, nobody will ever call us, and we'll never land another client that's not manufacturing, right? I don't think that's true at all. I'm sure there is some truth to, there are some people that land on your website and go, sounds like we're an accountant, right? I mean, they do manufacturing. I won't call now. So I can imagine that there's probably some truth to that. But I think the heart of my question was like, what's your team expecting or prepared for? And especially if they're incentive for growth or expecting growth or, doing other things, like it's not just you three partners, have to be aligned. But if there's, you said you've got somebody in sales, that usually means there's some variable comp, and depending on your team structure, like there's often a lot of things that this could, and I think it's absolutely the right thing that you're doing, but for a quarter or a year or pick a period of time, it could look like a setback.
Yeah. And we certainly, and I remind both my marketing team and my leadership team every now and like, hey, every now and then, I start second guessing this a little bit. We've got to all help each other stay strong, right? Because it's the long game. And again, like I firmly believe it's the right thing to do. And I firmly believe we'll be successful, but you just got to get to that momentum point where it's go, okay, now we know this is going to work. So, I think it's definitely a scary journey. We had somebody call in the other day that said, hey, it looks like you guys are very manufacturing specific. So they obviously picked, but they weren't a manufacturer. But can you still help me? So there are some people that either don't see it or will overlook it, and then there's others that aren't, right? So I think it's just when we go a couple months where we haven't talked to a manufacturer, it gets that's where it gets a little rocky, and people you can just see the doubt in the faces when we're talking about it, right? But generally, again, it's the long game, and you can't measure things in 1 month or 2 months. You got to look at where it's going to be at the end of the year. And for the most part, I think we're all starting to see that there's a little light here, and that takes a little pressure off of everybody, I think, to stay the course.
Yeah. I think there's part of me that goes, ooh, Midwest, Belief in America, and the conversation you have with Jack about the resurgence, right? There's part of me that goes, it makes a lot of sense. And there's part of me, it's like most MSPs, I think one of the last might be manufacturing, one of the last niches, because, a lot of people picture dusty old warehouses, laggards, low technology investment. Obviously that is not the case in a lot of scenarios, but it's just like, there are people that niche in nonprofit, and there are probably most MSPs that avoid nonprofit. So did your team have any feedback around, is manufacturing the right niche? Don't they, aren't they the slowest to adopt, or, those sort of things?
Yeah, there was absolutely some of that, and it's a little bit of a funny space, because you can get a manufacturer that has 100 employees and they have like 10 computers, right? So that's another thing we're learning, is to try to find out, okay, when you're looking for target audiences, like what's the right target audience?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think of the right way I want to answer this. We are definitely noticing there's seems to be kind of a binary split in this industry, where there's places that are 10 years behind in the technology, and they're going to be in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some that are just get some amazing cutting edge automation and data analytics, and they're pulling data off the machine to know when they got to change the jig out. I mean, just this crazy level of technology and where they're feeding the data back. Mm-hmm. So it feels a little bit like there's this fork in the road where they're either way behind, and I'm sure there's plenty of small machines out there, machine shops that don't need technology at all, right? It's 5 guys, they're just cranking out some parts down there with the drill press doing their thing. They don't need a lot of technology. But most of this, if you're in any kind of growing industry where you're trying to scale or get bigger, the technology is the thing that sets you free. And part of that is having the right infrastructure, right? You can't build a bunch of automation on top of a network that hasn't been upgraded in 20 years.
Yeah.
And then obviously security is just a giant thing. It's like everybody's a target, even when they don't think they are. And you have to be thinking about the security and how you're going to protect your proprietary data, your customers' info, whatever it may be. And I think that's just something that a lot of these places are going to have to come to realization that, okay, we can't do it the same old way anymore.
I know that you have been intentional around team and culture. So tell me what that means, because cultures means everything and nothing at the same time.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think that was probably one of the things I left off in one of my earlier answers when you said, what's helped us be successful. And it really has been building the right team.
Yeah.
And being, like you said, intentional about it. So probably 6 or 7 years ago, we made a concerted effort to look at all things around our team, right? Onboarding of new employees, how and when we do reviews, benefits, right? Asking them, listen, we did a couple surveys, and one of the things it's led to is we've won a best places to work in Illinois 3 years in a row, and we just applied again for this year, and we're very proud of that. I mean,
That's huge.
It's based off the employee surveys. So I think, and that took a lot of time. It took a lot of effort. It hurt us in some other areas, right? We spent some in metronomics, they call it the soft edge stuff, where it was a little bit more not necessarily showing up in the bottom line. And matter of fact, in some cases, it probably hurt the bottom line. But I think, again, when you look at it long term, it's getting that foundation level right, so that if you don't have the right team, everything else is a struggle.
Yeah.
So one of our 3-HAG that we had set 2 years ago, now that'll come to fruition here at the end of this year, was to get a middle management team in place that can run the day-to-day business without the leadership team being involved. And we are well on our way to achieving that. And it lets the leaders get up to that kind of higher level and, think about strategy and just think about what's next and not be mired in the day-to-day reactive firefighting that is MSP, right? That's so much of it. So, I think all those are pieces that layer on top of each other to get to that what's next. And it really, if you don't have the right team, it's a constant struggle to, we got to replace this person. We got to do that. So we've been really fortunate. We have a good team. Our average tenure here is 7 years, which is kind of unheard of in the MSP industry. And I think we're very proud of that. So I think but it took intentional, conscious effort to do all that and really think about what is culture and, putting core values in place and having a purpose and all those things that are above and beyond just the paycheck and doing the job.
Is that something that you more recently realized, or did 30 years ago you guys just knew we needed all these things and culture was number one?
Oh no, it was, when we first started, right, our first hires, we were like literally the first technician we hired, we sent him out in the field on the first day. Here you go fix this computer.
Yeah.
There was no training, there was no onboarding. It was literally like trial by fire. And at some point we learned, obviously, that wasn't right. So no, we've probably went maybe not quite 20 years, but we went more than 15 probably, where it was just show up and do it, right? It's broke, fix it, figure out what's next. And, and it was really all that. There was no forward-looking strategy. There was no thinking about the culture. It was just, point the person to make the customer happy, right? It was make the customer happy, do what you need to do, and it just put your head down and get it done.
Interesting.
As a matter of fact, that very first technician, he's still here. He's been here 21 years now.
Wow.
He's gone through a lot of roles, right? He's our director of client success now. But it's changed a lot since that startup mentality where we tell the story, like where 2 of us and him went out, we pulled an all-nighter to get a server up and running. And then we worked the next day, right? Because it was stuff scheduled, right? So he says, I think they let me go home at 3:00 or something that day. I got off early. I got to go home at 3:00.
Yeah. Sounds like the early days of any MSPs.
Yeah. Right.
Business.
It's that startup phase when, you're very early on when you do the work during the day, come home at night, make some quotes, go out on a sales call the next day, right? You're just wearing all those hats. So I think it's just learning to go through those phases as you're moving from a startup to, you're kind of building some momentum, and and I think that's really a very big piece of it, is being able to understand when it's time to change, when it's time to try something different. And you got to be willing to go through those seasons of business where it's not always the same. You can't, 30 years later, you can't run it the same way you did when it was a startup. It just doesn't work.
Right. Can you share something that you've invested in culture, and maybe if you could share something that you feel like has been successful and something that hasn't?
We've certainly gone through various iterations of whether it's I'll call it tokens of appreciation. So we had printed up cards that were they were 5 points, 10 points, 25 points, and teammates would give them to each other. And then eventually you could turn them in for money. We tried a lot of that. Again, it was meant to write that 5-point card was meant to just recognize something somebody did quickly, right? But people never quite understood that, because they were like, well, what's that worth? Or, you'd give them a card to go get a cup of coffee, right? So it's that recognizing those little things. And I think some of this may be generational a little bit. I think as the generations have come along, some generations appreciate that type of thought and some don't. So that's been certainly, again, I think I keep going back to the common theme of sometimes you do something and it works for a couple of years and then it doesn't, right? We invested in Crewhoo. The listeners will know Crewhoo. We did a lot, Crewhoo for giving, again, it was about giving people praise and passing along kudos, and then you get points and you turn it in. And that was a fairly heavy investment that did not get a lot of return. We didn't get a lot of people taking advantage of it. They'd accrue points and forget to turn them in. And so that one definitely, we ran that one for probably 3 years before we eventually killed it off. And we haven't really had a program going. And now just this quarter, we've assigned one of our teammates, hey, go figure out a new recognition plan, something that we can do so we can get back to recognizing the positives, right? Because it's very easy to get stuck in the just day-to-day doing, and you start taking things for granted and don't recognize that, hey, that little thing that person does every day is kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Right? We talk about, we've never, when we interview new people, one of my teammates says, yeah, they've never missed a payroll. I'm like, well, yeah, of course. But that's a big deal. This guy, I worked at a place where that happened a lot, right?
Yeah.
And our HR coordinator gets it in there every time, every month. So the ACH show up in people's accounts just like it's supposed to. And yeah, she does it with ease and you kind of forget about it, but that's a big deal that it's easy to forget about. It should be recognized, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just, again, it goes back to trying new things and keeping it fresh, right? Because if you just do the same old thing for the longest time, we've been running. So we're hybrid, right? So a couple days a week, the local team is here, but we have people out of state. So we do a lot of our huddles, all our meetings are usually on Teams, right? So we had every week there'd be a different team's background, a theme, right? So next week's baseball or whatever it would be. We ran that for, probably since COVID, we've been running that. But participation was starting to wane and people were starting to lose enthusiasm. So finally the other day, somebody said, we just need to just pause this for a while and come up with something new. So I think it's just a lot of, you got to try to keep it fresh. MSP work is hard. And you got to try to find things to keep people engaged and recognize the positives, but it's not easy.
Sure. Is there anything that you felt like you've done? I don't know if it's engagement or recognition or benefits. Like what do you think has been successful?
Certainly one of the things we do is whatever surveys we do, whether we get the feedback from the best places to work in Illinois survey we get back, right? Because we get the scores back and we can see where we scored the worst. Or if it's an internal survey we put out, we actually listen to that. We take the feedback and we make changes, right? So we did not have a matching 401k for years. And that was one of the feedbacks we got. It was one of the lowest scores we got. So we put the matching 401k in place. Again, that's a significant investment that we weren't really prepared to make, but we said, you know what, we need to do this and we need to figure it out, right? We'll get the money from somewhere else. So I think that's been a big part of it, is listening and then making the changes, right? It's easy to listen, but it's sometimes harder to make the changes. And in cases where maybe there was a suggestion that we couldn't do, or we decided we didn't want to do, is going back and explaining why, right? Not just ignoring it, saying, hey, we heard you. However, we can't do this right now, but we'll keep it in mind for the future.
Yeah. I think sometimes people miss that last part, which is super critical.
Yeah.
Let me switch gears. I'm interested to hear, Jeff, what's the biggest lesson you've learned over all your years in business?
We probably touched on it 5 times today. You got to stay flexible. First of all, you got to be in it for the long haul, right? There's way too many stories, success stories, people talking about, listen, you give it a good couple years, you'll build a good business and then you're on the beach. No, that doesn't happen. Right. So you got to be in it for the long haul, but you got to stay flexible as you grow, right? I mean, at one point I was quoting, servicing, receiving, ordering, right? I did all those, but you got to change, right? You got to be willing to say, okay, now it's time. I need to hand this off and I need to be able to move on to the next thing. So that just flexibility and paying attention to the seasons of the business and where you're at in the journey, and then make sure you're willing to make changes.
What does being in it for the long haul mean to you?
I think it's different for different people. But it's really, for me, it's don't think you're going to do this for a few years, right? It's decades to get probably generally. Now, yeah, there's all kinds of stories where somebody did something crazy and they built this app, and sure, those are unicorns and they don't happen very often. And I think part of that is for people to, what is your definition of success, right? There are plenty of people, plenty of MSPs that have it as a lifestyle business and they're perfectly happy. And as long as you know that's your goal. But again, if your plan is I have a lifestyle business and I'm going to take my foot off the gas, eventually it drifts back into never, never land, and then you got to come back at it. So I think, I think the long haul is you're in it until you're not, because if you're in it, if you're half in it, you're going to get half success, and eventually that's not going to work.
Yeah. If there was one thing you could do over or differently, what would that be?
So I mentioned that I'm not a guy who looks backwards whatever what's done is done. I'm not I should have turned right where I turned left, and it's hard. But if I had to do it over again, I probably would have avoided all those businesses that we brought in and then ended up taking out. Now, again, they may have been a huge part of our success. Who knows? But knowing what I know now, I would probably have skipped that phase and really doubled down on just the IT and, done just that, stayed focused.
I love that focus. Given all that's going on in your business, the world, technology, et cetera, what's something you're looking forward to?
I look forward to every day. Business is a challenge. I love business. I love the challenge. I think the MSP industry is a very particularly challenging industry. I just love figuring out what's next, whether it's I'm going to figure out how to, solve marketing, which is no such thing. Figure out how to deliver better service to the customer. Whatever it is, whatever challenge happens to be up for that day, week, month, quarter, I'm up for it and I'm ready to go.
What is the one you're looking forward to the most now?
Boy, I'd like to say marketing, but man, I've spent a lot of time in the last couple of years just becoming way more of a numbers guy, just really digging in. And, I was a technologist by trade. I've learned business, but I never really had the financial background. So really spending a lot more time looking at numbers and just figuring out what the right numbers are for us, how to adjust the levers to get the numbers to move the right direction. That's pretty fun stuff. Boy, did that sound nerdy.
Look, you're in the right group. You're in the right camp. What's your biggest challenge?
I would say the biggest challenge is trying to grow that bottom line profit while maintaining a good team and keeping customers happy, right? Those are all, they're not exactly mutually exclusive, but they fight against each other, right? Yeah, I could lay off half our team and put the bottom line to it. Now my team's unhappy, we're unhappy, and the clients are unhappy. So I think it's that balance, finding the balance point of those three things to get that, kind of back to a symbiosis where, we can get to the bottom line number we need with the right team. They're happy, right? One of our things is we always tell people, listen, if I'm not here to get rich, I'm here to spread it, right? The founders took some risk, right? And the owners take more risk than anybody, but we want to spread the wealth around, right? I want a bunch of people on my team making above market rates.
Yeah.
But all of that then, one hurts the other, and then it's all about the clients, right? You got to be able to do all that with keeping the client, and clients are tough these days. It's gotten much harder to make clients happier than it used to. And one way to do that obviously is throw more people at it, but then that hurts the other one. So it's trying to find the balance in there, and it's three spinning plates, and you got to be dealing with them all.
That's a good point. What's the one book you'd recommend owners read?
Man, I've read some good ones. I would say if I was just going to pull one off, I probably should give another plug to the Metronomics. So that Shannon I mentioned, she's written 3 or 4 books, and they're all good books. American Icon, which is the story of Alan Mulally and Ford, I think is a phenomenal business book. Shoe Dog by Phil Knight's a close second.
Interesting. I like that. Two good picks. Yeah. So that and any of the books on Metronomics by Shannon.
Yeah, Three Hagway, Metronome Effect, and Metronomics. Very good. Even if you're following a different system, I think there's things you could definitely pull out of there and apply to whatever system you're using, or maybe that's a system for you.
Interesting. This has been really great, Jeff. How can folks connect with you, find you online if they'd love to pick your brain or just reach out to you?
Yeah, so easiest way is LinkedIn. All over LinkedIn. So Jeff Borrello, obviously the name's there on the screen. Jeff Borrello with Andromeda Technology. Reach out, connect with me, message me. I'm here to help. As you mentioned, there's going to be some MSPs listening here that are early on in the journey, or I've probably learned the lesson here or there that you want to talk about. But reach out. I'm more than happy to help. I love, you mentioned our core purpose in the company is helping people succeed, and that means people listening to this podcast. If I can help, let me know.
That's a huge gift. Make sure to take Jeff up on that if you're listening, and otherwise you'll regret it. Jeff, thank you so much for being on MSP Mindset. It has been a gift and a blessing.
Damon, thanks for having me. That was awesome.